Today I want to talk a little bit about acoustic flat picking guitarists, and maybe some of you that are into different genres and don't know much about it, maybe I can introduce you to some of the key figures there, tell you a little bit about them, not too much, don't want to make this run too long. But so when you're out there looking for records, or maybe you're interested in hearing something you're not familiar with, maybe you see them at a record show and don't really know what might be something good and what maybe to avoid, this will give you some ideas, some artists to look for. Now, playing right now, as you can see over my shoulder, is the Tony Rice unit, and that one's called Still Inside. And I'll talk about Tony Rice in just a minute. Flat picking guitar just simply means you're playing the guitar using a flat pick. And we usually refer to that when we're playing acoustic guitar, using a flat pick. A lot of cross picking up and down. Probably the first name that should come to your mind when you're talking about flat picking guitars would be this man, Mr. Dawg Watson. He was 40 years old before he came on to the national music scene and recorded this Vanguard's record he had done. Clarence Ashley had done an album, group album before this, but this was when he was about 40 years old, 1963 I believe, when this Vanguard record came out. And it's part of the folk boom. So you got tunes like Sitting on Top of the World, Intoxicated Rat, Omi Wise, one of those tragic murder songs, Tom Dooley, which had been made famous by the Kingston Trio, but which actually Dawg had ties to. All that murder and all those people, their relatives were in the same community. Deep Gap, North Carolina is where Dawg's from. They were in that same general area of the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. Dawg went on and recorded a ton of records and became very well known. Just a few of them, and this is by no means not picking out like the best, or they're all great. But he worked with his son Merle, named after Merle Travis. Eddie Merle's actually was his name, named after Eddie Arnold and Merle Travis. And so they performed together until Merle's untimely death. And a lot of people may have on your bucket list to go to Merle Fest in North Wilkesboro, North Carolina one day. That would be a great trip. I'm sure I want to go one day. I still haven't made it. But a lot of that was a Vanguard's record. This is a Sugar Hill. He did a lot on Sugar Hill. He did some on Flying Fish Records as well. Those are three labels when you're looking for quality acoustic music: Rounder, Flying Fish, Sugar Hill, and of course Vanguard for more like Joan Baez and some of the other artists as well. Here's another Sugar Hill release, Riding the Midnight Train. I believe this might have won a Grammy here. This is more of a straight bluegrass album here. Dawg's not really a bluegrass player. He plays bluegrass sometimes, but it's more just acoustic guitar music that you would call his music. Great names here: Sam Bush, Mark O'Connor, Bella Fleck is playing the banjo on here. Alan O'Brien also adding some harmony vocals and some guitar on here, along with Merle's guitar and clawhammer banjo and Dawg's flat picking guitar, of course. And another artist along those same lines that I think you would enjoy and find interesting would be Norman Blake. Norman he's 81 now. He's from that area around where Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, and North Carolina are all meet there. He's from Sulphur Springs, which I thought was in Georgia, but somewhere I read they said it was in Alabama. And he's born in Chattanooga. Norman did about 10 years session work in Nashville, toured with Johnny Cash, and in early 1970s he started doing his own solo work. Before that, he was on John Hartford's Aeroplane landmark album, and some others along those lines. And here's your Led Zeppelin connection. Robert Plant and Alison Krauss album. He plays on that much more recent album. But he put out a slew of great albums, and this is Old and New on Flying Fish. He recorded on Flying Fish and Rounder mostly. If you see any Norman Blake, you're not going to get a bad record. Here's another one. This one's on Rounder. It's Nashville Blues. He married Nancy, and so sometimes albums are Norman and Nancy Blake albums, or in this case, the Rising Fawn String Ensemble. Great flat picking guitar, great work. Norman also played on the Will the Circle Be Unbroken, the landmark 1972 album that the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band put together, that merged the great old musicians of country genre and old time genre with more modern rock musicians like the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. But Norman Blake, you can't go wrong. Interesting little story. He's 81 now. He says he's not really going to be doing any more recordings, but you can pretty much, like clockwork, expect one album a year for many years from Norman Blake, and that's what you got. He said what happened was the record label would set up a particular amount they were going to, in his budget to record his album, and they'd say, this is your budget. You can go in and you do it when and where you want, with whoever you want to. Gave him a lot of freedom. So he had this budget to work with, and he would always produce and spend less than they had allotted him to make the album. He said he would do that once a year because he had to pay his taxes, his property taxes, I guess, and income taxes. And so that album would come out about the same time each year because he knew he was going to need the money to pay his taxes. So he would take the leftover money from his budget, get his taxes for the year paid off, and present the album to Rounder, usually Rounder Records, but sometimes Flying Fish. Another one, flat picker, you might not be quite as familiar with if you knew these names. Dan Crary. Dan Crary, and real strikes me as a really nice guy. His work is kind of sporadic because he has a degree in theology, and he teaches. He's a professor. He taught in Kansas at one time. He's from Kansas originally, and right now he's at Cal State Fullerton, I believe. He's speech communications, I believe, is his professor, is his department that he's in. Dan Crary, great acoustic guitarist. He won the National Flat Picking Championship in Lawrence, Kansas once, I believe, when he was a young man. And he went to Louisville to go to grad school, I believe it was, work on his doctoral degree in theology. And while he was there, he was a part of one of the very key newgrass bands, the Bluegrass Alliance. He was their first guitarist. He was guitarist. Sam Bush replaced him, and then Tony Rice replaced Sam Bush. But so you have gaps between albums from Dan Crary because he was busy, multitasking, I guess you'd say. Here's another good one, Sweet Southern Girl. This one's on Sugar Hill. I believe that other one was on Sugar Hill as well. And one more. This one's on Sugar Hill as well. Guitar. And this includes Sam Bush on the mandolin, Mark O'Connor playing fiddle, Bella Fleck on the banjo, T. Michael Coleman, longtime bassist for Doc Watson, playing the bass here, and show you the diversity in flat picking repertoire. He does a melody of Stanley Brothers tunes on side one, Fling Ding, Hard Times, Daybreak in Dixie, and then Memories of Mozart on the same side of the album, from Mozart's Piano Sonata number 11 in A major, third movement, Rondo a la Turca. Okay, that's beyond me, but you see, Flat picking is not limited to any one, like just traditional folk melodies, things like that. You have classical, you have jazz, you have all kinds of things merged in together with these acoustic flat pickers. So it gives it a lot of variety. I know we've got a lot of jazz fans in the VC community and the vinyl community. So I want to touch on this gentleman here, Mr. Tony Rice, born in Danville, Virginia, but raised in Los Angeles. Tony Rice and his brothers were taught to play by their father, and he played with lots of the LA musicians growing up, and Clarence White, another great flat picker that I'll just name drop here. Clarence White was kind of one of his mentors. And Clarence White, you look for Kentucky Colonel's albums if you want to get into the Clarence White acoustic stuff. Of course, he was later with the Byrds and did a lot of things before he was killed by a drunk driver. But this is on Rebel Records, and this includes J.D. Crow's on here, his brother Larry. Bobby Sloan is doing the fiddle and the bass on here. This is a more traditional bluegrass. Got Freeborn Man, Salt Creek, Doing My Time, John Hardy, 9 Pound Hammer, very traditional. And you get an album like this from Tony Rice. He always wore great sports coats. This is Me and My Guitar, and this is on Rounder Records. And he was a great singer too. He really liked the songwriting of Gordon Lightfoot. In fact, he's got one album that's nothing but Gordon Lightfoot songs. But he's got songs on here written by James Taylor, several from Gordon Lightfoot. Here's one from Norman Blake, and he's got some originals on here. And he's got a bunch of Gordon Lightfoot, like five of these are Gordon Lightfoot, 6 maybe. There's Bob Dylan on here, Sweetheart Like You. So that's another great one. And then Tony Rice also was heavily influenced by jazz and listened and learned a lot of jazz chord structures, and delved outside of the realm of what was traditionally played. He was not above taking lessons. In the late 70s, he took lessons from jazz musicians to learn more about how to incorporate jazz sounds. And he played on, he was in the original David Grisman quintet, and where they merged bluegrass, classical, and jazz. And he did a couple albums with David Grisman, and then went out on his own with the Tony Rice Unit, and this one is called Mar West. Very good album. He does mostly original, but he does a Miles Davis song on here, Nardis. I hadn't listened to this album in a while, but I believe it's totally instrumental. Everything else is a Tony Rice song composition, except for the Miles Davis, Nardis. And then the Tony Rice Unit, what's playing right now, Still Inside. And this is mostly his own compositions. There's an Earl Clue in here, but David Grisman, and mostly his own stuff. Very beautiful guitar work and instrumentation. And finally, now those guys are all, I think Tony Rice is in his late 60s, Norman Blake's in his 80s, and Dan Crary, I believe, is in his 80s. Of course, Doc Watson passed away, 6-7 years ago, and he was born in 1926, I believe. No, 23. And but what about the younger generation? Well, there is a young lady named Molly Tuttle from California, but she doesn't really play flat picking, but she's a great guitarist. She plays kind of almost, she used to play clawhammer banjo sometimes, and so she plays with a lot of finger picking involved too. But as far as flat picking is concerned, Billy Strings, and great album cover there for Billy Strings. Check out Billy Strings. This is home. He's from Michigan. I know we got some vinyl community folks from Michigan there. I think maybe it's Steve from Michigan, several others. This album's called Homes, and it's produced by he and Glenn Brown. And this is a new album. I just got this. They sold so many to begin with when I ordered it after it came out. It'd been out for a few weeks. When I ordered it on Amazon, it took a month to get there because I had to go back and press some new ones. This is on Rounder Records. And almost everything on here, if not everything, he wrote or co-wrote. Yeah, he wrote or co-wrote all this. Billy Strings. So check him out. Brian Sutton's a very good flat picking guitarist as well. So there's a lot out there. So I urge you to look into it and expand your horizons if you never listened to acoustic flat picking guitarists, or add to what you've got, or make some comments down below. Say, well, you got this wrong or that wrong. I think I got it pretty much right. I tried not to get too detailed, so I wouldn't get too much wrong. But if you're out there crate digging, you can't go wrong with anything from Doc Watson, anything from Tony Rice, Norman Blake, Dan Crary, or Billy Strings, although this is only his second solo album, I believe. And finding it on the first one on vinyl is kind of difficult. So I'll say goodbye. Remember, be kind to your neighbors. And everybody's your neighbor. Goodbye.